about the dictators in Europe that took over Germany and Italy, Russia, and Spain, and three of these directly led to conflict, which led to World War II. So to understand how these people came to power, we're going to look at three terms that describe the type of countries, the type of governments that these dictators worked in. One is totalitarianism. That is when a government has total control over a country and it uses terror to kill off anyone who doesn't agree with them, otherwise known as dissent. And this was what happened in the Soviet Union. And really any fascist government uses terror to scare people who don't believe in what they believe into doing what they want. Another form of this government is called fascism. That's a government that emphasizes the importance of the nation and the supreme authority of its leader. Can totalitarian governments also be fascist? Yes, you can be both of these things at the same time. And the last is communism. This is a government that relies on a extremely strong central government, like Washington, D.C. here in America, or in Russia, where it was communist. It was in Moscow. And they have no respect for human rights or personal freedoms. So not like our government here, but very much like the government they used to have in what is today Russia, what was then the Soviet Union. Can a communist government also be a fascist government? Sort of, although communism generally is run by a ruling class or committee, but a communist government can most definitely also be a totalitarian government. And that leads us to our first leader, Joseph Stalin. He was the communist leader of the Soviet Union, which included Russia and a lot of the surrounding countries that Russia had taken over. The first thing that Joseph Stalin did when he became leader of the Soviet Party and the de facto leader of the Soviet Union was he created an economic policy. He took over all the farms in the country and created huge collective farms. Some of these farms were as big as, almost a quarter the size of the state of Indiana. The problem with these farms is when he did this, he hadn't worked out all the details, wasn't very effective, and they had a drought, so not much food was produced on these huge collective farms. Farmers that resisted this policy, they lost their land, they lost food for their families. Anyone else who resisted the takeover of Joseph Stalin was sent to labor camps. And over the time period that Joseph Stalin was in power, anybody that opposed his policy or his rule went to labor camps, and that totaled over 5 million Russians in the time that he was in power. Millions of Russians starved during this time because the collective farm system did not work very well, and millions more were forced to build and run these new industrial centers like Stalingrad. Moscow became another industrial center. One of the reasons they had these industrial centers is Russia had never really gone through the Industrial Revolution like America did, and Stalin was wanting to take them from an agriculture society, a society based on farming, to an industrial society like the rest of Europe and the United States. Next slide. This is this is the results of one of Stalin's purges, and you can see Soviet soldiers looking through the bodies in the middle of this scene. The Soviets used purges to remove anyone that threatened the power of the Soviet Union. In the course of Stalin's reign, when he was in charge in Russia, 7 million were arrested, over 1 million were executed, and millions, countless millions more were sent to labor camps or just disappeared. And this is an entire village in eastern Russia that was completely wiped out by by Stalin and his Red Army. Next slide. All right, moving on to El Duce, the leader. This is Benito Mussolini, who started a fascist party in Italy, and when he started this party, he was completely honest about it. I'm starting a fascist party. I'm going to be the guy in charge. There's only one answerable is to me. So they elected him because things were bad. They were in a Great Depression in Italy, just like in the United States. They were looking for some sort of answer, and Benito Mussolini said he could not only fix Italy, he could also return it to its glorious past, which of course was the Roman Empire. All right, enough with lecture 1.